I might be all over the place, both literally and figuratively, but I've been able to stay organized and accomplish big things in my life by keeping this journal of 4 simple lists. I've been using this technique for over 10 years now, and it's helped me navigate my career and my personal life and my schedule. And in this last decade, I've grown so much through all my travels and moves and relationships, all while building a brand and managing clients and also discovering new passions and moving abroad on my own. The list goes on, but I know that I'm not alone in feeling like there can always be a lot to manage. I know that we're all juggling so many different things at once and that it can feel overwhelming at times, or it can feel like things can fall through the cracks. So I would love to share with you how I use just this one notebook to stay on top of everything and organized. And I know there are many tools and apps and programs out there that are very advanced and very robust for keeping track of and managing your to-dos. But this is not that. I think I've stuck to using this method because it is overly simplified, and because I like writing things down, and I like crossing things off, and because I like having a single physical place where I can store my thoughts. So how this all started, how I kind of naturally developed and used this technique over the years, was because of a job I had in my 20s. I was interning at a very glamorous production and talent agency in Beverly Hills, and I was then promoted to become the personal assistant to the CEO and founder of the company. And she is this incredibly accomplished and fabulous and elegant woman that I admired and continue to admire. But I had never had a job like that before, so I was trying to figure it out as I went. But I was only just this relatively inexperienced girl in her early 20s who all of a sudden was playing a huge part in managing the life of a very accomplished woman in her 50s. She had her business and kids and a husband and a household with staff, and she had a social life and a public persona to uphold. And like I said, I really admired her and was fascinated by how much she had accomplished and how much she was managing. And then it became my job to help her do it all. So I was managing her calendar and her appointments, and the pace was so fast, like out of a movie. And it was really just a barrage of tasks, and I needed to stay on top of it all. I was responsible for anything and everything that was mentioned to me, whether it was directly or indirectly, from her or from someone else, through email or by text or verbally. And I was fielding things from so many different directions, and I just needed a single place to keep a to-do list of all of my tasks, regardless of how simple they were or how complicated they were, or regardless of however many steps each task actually required. And I wasn't given any direction or requirements to organize anything. The priority was just to get it done by doing whatever it took. So I did have the freedom to design my own system, but I honestly didn't even think about it because I didn't have time to think about it. I really just hit the ground running with this role. So what I did, I just took a spiral notebook and I wrote everything down. The order didn't matter because everything was important and it all just needed to be on paper so that it wouldn't be forgotten. Because if something was forgotten, it was my fault, and that would honestly be humiliating. And I was also just really driven to succeed, and I also liked being organized. So all of these factors together went into designing this really simple method. So with everything just written down in this notebook, sometimes it would be 3 or 4 pages of outstanding tasks. If I completed something quickly, then it would just be crossed off. But of course, not everything was that easy. So for anything on the list that was more complicated, for example, I was waiting for someone to call me back about something, or there were just multiple steps involved, then I would consider that pending and I would just put a dash next to it and move on. And that was just my shorthand to signal to myself that it had been addressed and to come back to it later. And also to remind myself to follow up on it or to cross it off whenever I got my response or found the solution. And if I ever had a second of downtime, I would just scan the list for anything else that I could accomplish or make progress on. So I was constantly crossing things off the list, and I was also constantly adding things to it. And I would rewrite the list every few days in the same notebook, and anything that was still outstanding would then just be transferred to the top of the next list. And with this system, I just got into this rhythm and this cycle of productivity. And it was so helpful to have everything in one place because I would then meet with my boss at the end of the day in the office or wherever was convenient. Maybe I would hop in the car with her on the way to an appointment. And then I could easily just run through the list of everything that was outstanding. And then I can point out where I was getting stuck. And then she could update me on priorities. And the method was just really effective for being productive and being constantly in search of finding solutions and for not letting anything fall through the cracks. So after that job, I had moved on to other things and other projects, and I was also starting my own things. And with time, eventually, my own life was becoming more and more multifaceted. And it wasn't even a conscious decision, but at some point, I just started using the same notebook method for keeping track of my own life. And over the years, it's evolved to focus on what's been important for me as a single woman in her 30s who loves to travel for fun and for work. And the 4 categories that I always refer back to are my personal to-do list, my professional to-do list, my shopping list, and my weekly calendar. Maybe these same lists can be helpful for you, or you can adjust them based on your priorities in your life. For example, if you have kids, you can have a list for each kid. Or if you have multiple projects, you can have a list for each project. But I think what's most important here is to just keep the categories as simple as possible. So my first list, which is my personal to-do list, is pretty straightforward, but it has all of the one-off tasks that I need to complete. It doesn't have anything that I do repeatedly, like grocery shopping or anything else that's really become a habit in my life. But instead, it has anything that I could forget or overlook if I get busy or distracted or naturally move on to other things in life. So this list can have anything like a reminder to send a thank you note to somebody, which can then be crossed off as soon as it's completed. And there are also much more complex tasks on my personal to-do list. For example, let's say I needed to renew my TSA PreCheck status. So that involves an application, and then I have to wait for an approval, and then I have to schedule an interview, and then I have to wait for the official card to arrive in the mail so that I can use the ID number when I book flights. It's not until the last step is completed that it gets crossed off my list. And regardless of the task being as simple as send so-and-so a thank you note, or as complicated as TSA PreCheck renewal, each of these tasks will only get one line on my personal to-do list in this notebook. And all of the additional steps can live in my email, or they can live in my head, or they can live out in the world if I'm waiting for someone else to complete that part of the task. But what's important for this system to stay simple is that it's just one line for one task. And the same goes for my professional to-do list. For me, the items can look like following up on this new lead, or a reminder to invoice a one-time client, or a reminder to update an old blog article with new information. I don't include any of the tasks that I perform weekly or that I've automated, like invoicing long-term clients or publishing content to my blog or to this channel. So the thought process for these 2 lists, my personal to-do list and my professional to-do list, is essentially the same. My third list is my shopping list. And this is more so a way for me to practice mindfulness and to be really intentional about the things that I buy so that I can avoid overconsumption and so that I can avoid buying things that I do not need or really want. So it's both a wish list of things that are nice to have, like clothes or accessories or a very specific set of skis, for example, but it's also a list of the everyday things that I need but don't buy regularly, like a new leash for my dog, for example. So the reason I keep everything on this list is so that I can take my time to do research and find the best prices and find the best value. One thing about me is that I almost never buy anything full price. There are always sales and promotions and discounts, and especially when it comes to clothes and accessories, I will almost exclusively shop secondhand or vintage or just very heavily discounted. So having this list is a reminder of the types of things to look out for when I'm on secondhand platforms or at vintage stores. And whenever I do order something that's on the list, I will simply just put my dash next to it, and that will remind me to expect the package in the mail. And as soon as I receive it, I will cross it off the list. The best part of doing this is that I never buy anything impulsively, and I also never experience buyer's remorse. The hard and fast rule that I follow is that I will not buy anything unnecessary if it is not already on my list. And in the moments that I do find something that is on my list, I can buy it with no regret because I know that it's something that I truly want and have been writing and rewriting in my notebook for months. Sometimes I'll have something on my shopping list for years before I'm able to find a great deal on it, but when it happens, it's always worth the wait. So my shopping list is definitely has a practical element to it, and it makes it easy to stay organized, but I think the biggest benefit is the clarity it brings and the opportunity to be really mindful about my choices and my consumption. And that way I can avoid cluttering my mind and my space with any unnecessary things. So my fourth list is actually a weekly calendar for the next 3 months or so. And I use the calendar in my iPhone for details and appointments and reservations, but this calendar in my notebook is essentially a big picture perspective of each week, line by line. And I mentioned that I travel a lot for fun and for work, so on each line I will put where I will be physically, either at home or elsewhere, and also note if there is anything big going on that week that will dictate where I will be. For example, if I'm enrolled in French class, then my note for that week will be Paris/Alliance Française, which is the name of my French school. Or if a friend or my family is planning to visit me, then my note for that week will be Paris/Mom and Dad. And if I don't have anything written down for those future weeks, then that signals to me that I have flexibility or availability to travel. And then that may inspire some daydreaming and trip planning. And in that case, I'll go back to my personal to-do list and start adding things like search flights or book a trip. And with that, we've come full circle through my notebook. I know we all have a lot going on, and I'm often asked what are the tips and methods I use to stay organized and stay sane in this busy world. I hope that this has been helpful, or that this has given you some insight into how you could simplify your daily life. I love sharing what's worked well for me, and if you're interested, I have other videos about mindfulness and living intentionally. My channel is mostly about finding yourself through your hobbies and following your intuition through life's path. So if that sounds like you, then don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time.